He'll help. Dr. Pirohov will definitely save lives. Soldiers called Mykola Ivanovych Pirohov a wonderful doctor. There were rumors about cases of surprising healings and the unprecedented skills of this military surgeon. Because of this, on one occasion a dressing station received a serviceman without a head. It was brought separately, with the words, "Let's Mr. Pirohov sew it back on. He can do anything." As a doctor, he did not see the difference between those without titles and nobles, the poor and the rich. He said, "Whoever chose the work of a doctor should swear an oath that he'll serve his people in an honest way." That was the meaning of his life. The Vishnya Manor in Vinnytsia lives a quiet life. This is where the Museum of Outstanding Surgeon Mykola Pirohov is located. This old estate has been visited by more than 8,500 people from 180 countries. Someone learns about the doctor for the first time, while someone thousands of kilometers away is traveling to honor an outstanding scientist, the father of field surgery, and a man whose experience helps to save thousands of lives to this present day. As long as there are wars in the world, the genius of Mykola Pirohov will be honored. Mykola Pirohov was born the 13th child in his family. Was this some kind of sign? Numerologists insist that the number 13 brings good luck, and it was generous to this future beacon of world medicine. His father, Ivan Ivanovich, enjoyed success in his military career. He married a sweet, kind girl from an old merchant family. Mykola's parents paid special attention to the education of children. Every Sunday, the family visited church, observed fasts, and honored religious holidays. Many doctors were guests at the hospitable household of the Pirohov family. They were happy to talk with the inquisitive Mykola. They told stories from personal practice. No wonder that the boy decided from an early age to become either a military man like his father or a doctor, like their family doctor Yefrem Mukhin. Often imitating the doctor, the boy asked members of the household to fall ill. He promised that he would certainly cure them. Even a cat could not avoid such an exciting game. Dressed up in human attire, she also became a patient. At 11, Mykola was sent to a private boarding house in Moscow. No one had imagined that this 13th child would become not only the pride of the family, but also glorify the whole country for the whole world. The 19th century entered the history of world culture as the golden era of poetry, classical music, and grand accomplishments in science. The first voyage around the world under the command of Ivan Krusenstern, the discoverer of Antarctica. In fact, Mykola Pirohov was growing in the world of intellectual and technical progress. At the age of 14, and not as 16, as stated in the rules, this young man brilliantly entered the medical faculty of Moscow University. He graduated from it as a certified doctor. He was immediately enrolled in the Professional Institute of the Baltic Dorpat. These ancient narrow streets remember many famous doctors. In ancient Dorpat, this is now the city of Tartu in Estonia. Talents from all over the country prepared to become professors of medicine. In parallel with his scientific activities, the young doctor works in a surgical clinic. It took him a few years to write his doctoral thesis. and at just 22 he defended it in the best possible way. The University of Göttingen is one of the most prestigious educational centers in Lower Saxony. The professor of this institution, Bernhard Langenbach, became a friend and mentor to Pirohov in Berlin. He taught the cleanliness of techniques, helped to hear the whole and complete tune of an operation. Pirohov studied surgery and anatomy meticulously for 2 years. His thesis is translated into German, and rumors about a talented surgeon spread like wildfire throughout the cities of Europe. At 26, he already possesses the rank of professor. Old-timers in Vinnytsia say that during the Second World War, the German troops disregarded the old local authorities. However, they took off their hats when visiting the tomb of Mykola Pirohov. The occupiers recognized the genius of the great scientist. His works on field surgery were a reference book for Wehrmacht doctors. Those practitioners saved the lives of many German soldiers. Paris. There is always something to see there for any visitor. But Pirohov, tired after traveling, did not hurry to see the Champs-Élysées, but to meet an outstanding surgeon, Alfred Villepot. The visitor came just at the moment when the scientist read the first issues of Surgical Anatomy of the Arteries and Facials by Mykola Ivanovych. The Frenchman asked the guest vividly, "Do you know Professor Pirohov?" Hearing that the visitor was himself the one and only Professor Pirohov, Villepot began to praise the achievements of his colleague. In Paris, Mykola Ivanovych, apart from visits to clinics, attended lectures and practical classes for professors, but he later regretted the wasted time and money. Returning to the Russian Empire, Pirohov was offered to head the Department of Surgery at the Medic Surgical Academy of St. Petersburg. Soon Mykola Ivanovych opened the first surgical hospital for 1,000 beds and worked there for 10 years. The scientist is tirelessly looking for the best techniques, decides to conduct research on the frozen dead bodies. This allowed a breakthrough in science. The surgeon creates a completely new discipline, topographic anatomy, and soon there is an anatomical atlas of human. Thanks to this innovation, surgeons began to operate with minimal injury. It seemed that Mykola Ivanovych Pirohov never took time off. He was continually operating and advising others. He invented and personally supervised the production of medical instruments. At the same time, he understood that one soldier does not make a battle. That's why he devoted a lot of time and energy to training students. By the age of 30, Pirohov had received widespread recognition and fame. The press wrote at the time that in terms of attendance at his lectures, the scientist can be compared with the concerts given by then-famous opera star Angelica Catalani. Military medicine of almost the entire 19th century was horrified by its backwardness. A soldier of any European army had a much better chance of dying from smallpox, scurvy, or diarrhea than from a bullet from the enemy. Of all the medical tools, surgeons had just the lancet at their disposal, and it was used mainly to amputate hands and feet. Amputation was considered to be the only way to escape from deadly gangrene. Surgery was performed without anesthesia. It's no surprise that all the armies of the world valued surgeons who amputated quickly so that patients suffered less. They said that the chief surgeon of Napoleon's army, Larrey, carried out 200 amputations in 36 hours after the Battle of Borodino. This is roughly the state of military medicine that Pirohov found in 1847. Then the doctor first fell into the furnace of war. So as to conquer the Caucasus, Russia threw an army of over 200,000 men to the south. A military hospital in the village of Salty. Mykola Pirohov uses anesthesia for the first time. The experiment was carried out in order to ease the pain of hundreds of wounded. The idea was never seen before, so the innovator operated specially in the presence of soldiers. Only in this way could he convince others of the analgesic effect of ethereal vapors. There was not a single cry of pain during the surgery. A miracle is what the wounded troops said to each other.
Наркотизация посредством паров серного эфира.
Anesthesia by means of sulfur ether vapors was tested by me on animals, on myself, and finally on people. Wounded men in numerous cases in our Caucasian detachments.
В кавказских наших отрядах.
Write in the journal.
10 ноября в 6 часов утра.
We blocked the Turks at 6 a.m. on November the 10th. Then scribble a draft order. The main idea is to notify the commanders that I'm attacking an enemy that's superior to us.
Атакую неприятеля, превосходящего нас в силах.
(1853). The squadron under the command of Vice Admiral Pavel Nahimov in the Bay of Sinop let the Turkish fleet sink to the bottom. That's how the Crimean War began. Russia unleashed a conflict to partition Turkey. The emperor planned to realize the ambitious dream of his ancestors, hoisting an Orthodox cross on the Hagia Sophia, which the Turks had turned into a mosque. As a doctor, Pirohov was not slow in asking him to send him to the front line. However, there was no answer. Suddenly, an invitation came from Grand Duchess Elena Pavlovna, the wife of the son of the Russian emperor. At their meeting, they talked about the highest vocation of women, mercy. Mykola Pirohov also believed that the principles to live on earth not only for oneself is one of the most important vocations for women. However, at that time it was believed that they were not able to provide assistance in difficult military conditions, and their presence on the front line only leads to the corruption of servicemen. The surgeon still went to Sevastopol in 1854, surrounded by the enemy. There he formed the service of the Sisters of Mercy. Back then, they were not at all like modern nurses. Maids and widows of good birth from 20 to 40 years old could enter the community, but only after a probationary period of nursing the sick. Then they were trained in institutions of the Red Cross. In Crimea, Mykola Pirohov formed a group of nurses and pharmacists, which were divided into bandagers and evacuators. It's already been proven by experience that nobody other than women can better sympathize with the suffering of a patient and surround him with care that is unknown and, so to speak, not characteristic of men. In Sevastopol, Pirohov saw the city overcrowded with the wounded. They lay in barracks, hospitals organized in former palaces, in yards, and even on the streets. However, the wounded often envied the dead. In the hell of war, Mykola Pirohov showed his administrative talent. At his insistence, a new service appeared in the army for evacuating, transporting, and sorting patients. For the first time, a doctor divided the wounded into several groups. Priests and nurses provided help to the hopeless. The doctor himself operated on the seriously wounded. Whoever did not need urgent surgery was sent to the rear. Even before the appearance of antiseptics, the surgeon separated the wounded with purulent complications from those whose wounds were clean. This helped avoid the spread of infection and save hundreds of lives. At the front line, Mykola Pirohov first applied a plaster cast. So pain, suffering, and tireless work formed the foundations of military field medicine. But then the war ended. Pirohov returned to St. Petersburg in thoughtful mood. He had a lot of questions in his head about the army's shortcomings. He voiced them to the emperor himself. However, Alexander II was angry and didn't listen to the experience of the scientist. It was from that time that Pirohov fell out of favor with the court. Ukraine, Vinnytsia province, with its magnificent gardens and trills of nightingales. In 1866, Mykola Ivanovych Pirohov settled in the Vishnya estate, where he opened a free clinic for the poor and downtrodden. No matter what, he continues to practice medicine. Patients came to the miraculous doctor from all over the country. The experienced doctor also noted a direct link between poverty, hunger, and disease. In many cases, milk and meat, and sometimes good bread, is medicine for sick peasants, without which pharmaceutical drugs give little hope of success. Mykola Ivanovich stood at the origins of medicine in the countryside. In his articles, he recommended that zemstva doctors focus on preventing disease. Only this could resist in a several-fold reduction in patient numbers and mortality rates. Pirohov paid special attention to vaccinations against smallpox, the fight against diphtheria and syphilis, educational work with people who lived in towns. It was in Vishnya that the doctor wrote his fundamental work on military field surgery. He often travels abroad, taking part in scientific conferences and seminars. It was during one such trip that the eminent doctor was asked to help the outstanding Italian commander Giuseppe Garibaldi. All those who are going to be useful citizens must first learn to be human. However, his measured life was soon disrupted. In April 1877, after a parade of Russian troops held in Chisinau, the manifesto of Emperor Alexander II on the start of war with Turkey sounded at a solemn prayer.
Мы должны принести болгарам свободу от турок.
At the height of the fighting, the Tsar witnessed the sight of hundreds of wounded soldiers. They all begged for help as they bled. And then the autocrat remembered Pirohov, whom he had once excommunicated from his court. The surgeon responded to the invitation, but on condition that he would not be disturbed. Despite his old age, he was 67 years old, Mykola Ivanovych Pirohov went on the road. It was in Gorna Studena village, which is not far from Pleven, that the main apartment of the command was located. The doctor immediately organized treatment of soldiers, care of the sick and wounded, and here he managed to outsmart death more than once. Living in this world means constant fighting and constant winning. The great scientist devoted the last years of his life to medical practice. He finished writing the diary of an old doctor, As a surgeon who had passed through fire and water, he concluded that the brain is not the only conductor of thought. Life is much broader and deeper and is not limited to a biological organism. There is a supreme power, the so-called cosmic mind. It controls the life of the human race. Of all the world's secrets, the most cherished and most disturbing for us is I, ego. Still, there is another, even more cherished one. This is truth. But if every leaf, every seed, every crystal reminds us of the existence of a mysterious laboratory outside of us and in ourselves, in which everything works tirelessly for itself and for the environment with purpose and thought, then our own consciousness constitutes for us an even more sacred and at the same time most disturbing secret. And yet the professor could not predict his own illness. Outstanding surgeon Mykola Ivanovych examined Pirohov. The diagnosis was disappointing: cancer of the upper jaw. The colleague insisted on urgent surgery, but Pirohov did not want to believe in the deadly disease. He traveled for a consultation with one of his students, the famous Viennese doctor Theodor Billroth. The diagnosis was confirmed, but time had been lost and it was too late to carry out surgery. For the sake of comfort, Billroth said that there was no tumor. Pirohov returned to his Ukrainian estate, convincing himself of healing. He continued to receive patients and wrote his memoirs. I selflessly devoted my entire life to serving the truth and the motherland. The great surgeon died in 1881 at the Vishny estate in Vinica. His relatives said that a lunar eclipse took place in the sky at the moment of his death. Perhaps Mother Nature and Supreme Reason were grieving over the loss. The doctor's will was a surprise. He ordered his body to be embalmed. This was quite unusual for the time. It was thanks to this that the view appeared that Mykola Ivanovych Pirohov hoped for future success in medicine, which would enable him to be resurrected. So, do you believe in immortality? Yes, I believe. There? No, here. The immortality of man is in his deeds. The professor's wife executed his will. The body was placed in a crypt above which a church was built. Everything is still preserved. Only he who carefully studied nature, people, and himself has comprehended the truth. A nice and wonderful fate. Fight, devotion, and disgrace. Perhaps the phrase, the salt of the earth, is said about such people. Perhaps they're the thread that holds life together. And it's not about a plaster cast or anesthesia. The essence is in humanity itself, which is behind this, and without which all innovations lose their meaning. To be happiness for others is the real happiness, and the earthly ideal of life for everyone who devotes himself to the medical profession. His motto: search and be a human being. Mykola Pirohov.